Why did the chicken cross the road? I don't know. This joke doesn't have a punchline. Hey kids, welcome back to the channel. I am Uncle Frank and I hope that you are having a great day. Now, the other day, some friends and I were talking on the Discords, and we were discussing how likely it was that certain card games would fail in the near future. And for me, I treat the near future as the next 2 to 5 years. And we had a very lengthy discussion, just, talking about the pros and cons of each of the card games. On a different server, I had a conversation specifically about Pokemon. And on my server, even today, there was some discussion about not necessarily the death of Magic overall, but the potential decline of certain formats. And all of this discussion lately, all this doom posting about the end of card games, about the potential end of certain parts of card games, that got me thinking about a topic I've wanted to talk about for a bit now, and that's what kind of causes the end of a card game in general. You see, the thing is, most card games that have been released over the last nearly 30 years are gone. Ever since Magic the Gathering came out in 1993, 1994, there have been a plethora of card games released by various companies trying to get some of that green for their cardboard. And most of them have failed. In fact, most of them don't even last 2 whole years. And as a result of all those failures, we actually have a really good idea of what can cause the end of a card game over time. When it comes to evaluating the death of a card game, you'll notice 3 things tend to pop up fairly consistently over the last few decades: print run issues, quality issues, and player retention. And I'm going to try to tackle those in order. So first up, we have the print issues. You see, you've probably heard this story before. A new card game comes out, it's shiny and brand new, and everybody wants to get a bite of it. The problem is there's not enough to go around. So what ends up happening is there's a huge price increase on the secondary market as people are willing to pay anything to get a hold of these brand new boxes. The company in turn ramps up printing, leading to an influx of boxes hitting stores and the secondary market. Sometimes it's just reprints of what's there. Other times it's massively overprinting the next set. Either way, it results in not necessarily a market crash, but certainly less demand as supply kind of flushes into the market. It's not always just sealed product alone that can experience this. Single cards within a set can also be massively hyper printed. You've seen it with Magic the Gathering, where many of the rares and mythics released in the last few years are overly abundant, some of them having 4 or 5 printings in a single set, making most of those printings effectively worthless. When it comes to singles or sealed product being suddenly readily available on the market, I like to call that kind of just not necessarily a flooding of supply, but it's definitely something that kind of overwhelms demand. After all, while people are interested in acquiring your card game, maybe because it's scarce or maybe because they're just interested in it, when you suddenly have far more than that demand accounts for, you have a very, very dangerous situation on your hands. The second issue we should talk about is quality. And this can mean a bunch of things, from the actual quality of the printing itself, how well the cards are made in the packs, all that jazz, to just things like metagame balance, play testing that should be done in order to ensure new cards aren't necessarily hyper overpowered. There's none of that power creep nonsense. Just to things like how mechanical cohesion works between the cards, the flavor, all that jazz. There's a lot of ways that quality can decline over time with any given card game. And for a lot of new card games, when they hit the market, what happens is these card games are made at first by a passionate individual or a small group of individuals. Then there's the huge interest from the community. The player base wants more of this stuff, and the company is rushing to make more of it. If a company does rush more to make new sets, new cards, all that jazz, you're going to inevitably see some corners cut when it comes to card design, printing quality, etc., which will inevitably, in turn, lead to more complaints about how bad the game is starting to get. Now keep in mind, this issue in particular is the most subjective of the three. After all, how well you grade the quality of a given card game's production, metagame, testing, all that jazz, it's kind of up to you as an individual. And one person can think that a card game company is doing really good with a given set, while another person can think that that same set is an absolute travesty on every metric. The third thing we want to talk about is player retention. And sometimes a company can make a decision or release a set that someone just doesn't like, and they leave the card game never to look back. But it's important to remember that it doesn't really matter what the hobby is or even what the game is. Most people only stick with a given hobby for about 2 years. And that's regardless of if it's a card game, tabletop, RPG, video game, miniatures, war game, etc. Because over time, there's a lot of factors in life that can affect the time and money you have available to play a given card game. You could get a new promotion at work, now you don't have any time. You could get a new kid, now you don't have any money. You could lose your job, now you have no money or time for your hobby. There's just a lot of factors that can come at you from out of nowhere. And in the world of card games especially, this tends to average out over a large enough pool to just show that most players are only in a given card game for about 2 years. Sometimes 3, but 2 years is the average. These three factors tend to converge in a way that can devastate a card game, especially if it's brand new. And this creates what I like to call the 2-year filter. You see, most card games that hit the market do not survive past their second year in print. And if you look back throughout the decades of TCG history, you'll see that this 2-year filter doesn't just exist for dead card games, it has affected card games that survive to this day. We're going to look at 2 examples. The first example is a card game you might have heard about called Force of Will. It's a Japanese-made card game. It's like a merging of Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh! And way back in the day when it first came out, I was selling it in my store, and it was doing okay for the first year or so. And then local hype kind of skyrocketed. It was actually kind of impressive to see how many people were buying up boxes and decks that had been sitting on my shelf for, at that point, about a year. And then suddenly, what felt like almost a year later, it almost died. You see, Force of Will had this little number released, and this is the Millennia of Ages, and it is widely considered to be the worst set in the game's history. Whether or not that's true is up to debate, but I remember this bad boy very well. You see, this set was massively overprinted. This set is considered to be one of the poorest mechanically, and this set happened to release stateside about 2 years after the game released. I got to witness firsthand the effects that this can have on a local play group, a local tournament, as well as my own finances in regards to the game. The Millennia of Ages basically did not sell at all. I had a case and a half left. I bought 2 cases, and it barely moved. So, obviously, when it came time for the next set, I did not order as much. I think I ordered 4 boxes of the next set for Force of Will, and the set after that, I think I ordered only 2 boxes. Because by that point, the tournament scene in the area had basically died completely. All because of just a few bits of bad luck coming together to nearly destroy a card game. And I say nearly because Force of Will managed to bounce back. Force of Will is still in print today. New sets come out, I think, twice a year. I might be wrong about that. It's still a very good game. It still does okay. It's got some bad sets, it's got some good sets, but my point is it's still around and kicking despite all these negative things that almost wiped it off the map. Now, another card game you might have heard of is Magic the Gathering, and I know it's hard to believe, but once upon a time, Magic was very close to losing a huge chunk of its player base. You see, just like with Force of Will, there was an explosion of player interest in Magic the Gathering in 1993, 1994. There wasn't enough product to go around, and Wizards decided to have one of their sets be printed to hit demand, as it were. Unfortunately, the set that they did this with was Fallen Empires, which is, even to this day, considered the worst Magic set of all time. Very low power level, very janky cards, and yeah, it was printed to absolute hell. Now, I need to stress, it was not just Fallen Empires. There was the issue with Chronicles, the whole reserved list debacle. There was a lot going wrong in Magic at the time, but just like with Force of Will, Magic is still around and kicking to this day. And in the 30 years since Fallen Empires, there have been many terrible decisions made by Wizards of the Coast. But here we are, with Magic still going. So now, with all that said, I feel like it's important to emphasize that, while you can see some patterns that make it look like a card game will fail, or is failing, that it's not necessarily time to be gloomy, doomy, upset about it. Card games can come back from devastating releases followed by devastating loss of players. Magic's done it. Force of Will's done it. I think another card game has done it too. But what matters when all this comes together, when all this kind of negative, unfortunate circumstances convene, what matters is the core quality of the card game itself. Is it a good game with solid foundations for gameplay? Is the player base happy with the overall health of the card game, rather than just how bad one or two sets are? And is the company willing to continue? Because at the end of the day, what ultimately kills a card game is not the player base. It's not the overwhelming negativity of the players, and it's not even them cutting their wallets off from the company. It's the company themselves, whether or not they're willing to make a new set after a huge wave of negativity hits their card game. I suppose that's really all I've got for you kids today. If you want to hear more about this subject, maybe hear my thoughts on whether or not certain card games that are around right now will be around in 10 years, leave a comment down below. And if you want to see me being healthy, leave a like on this video, because for every like in this video, I do a push-up in the next video. And finally, please consider subscribing to the channel. After all, subscribers help the algorithm get these videos some more views, helping the channel grow even further. Just give it some thought. Talk to you kids later. My previous video got 11 likes. That's 11.